Hello world, my name is Hristina Crenn. Today I have the privilege with all of you to record the third episode of the Let's Talk Show webinars. Today I have also the privilege to talk with Mr. Quill Ferguson from the United States. He's actually a former military colonel that also worked for many years in the Balkan region, in Macedonia mainly, and other Balkan countries. Hello, Mr. Quill, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing fine, Hristina, and I'm so glad to join you this morning. It's going to be a privilege to chat with you and exchange some ideas and where we are as a team.
Absolutely. Thank you for accepting this invitation to be interviewed. Could you please briefly present yourself and what have you done so far? If you can tell us what you have done so far in your military career and in your academic career as well. Can you talk about yourself?
Okay, sure. I was your normal teenager living in Italy. My father was a U.S. Air Force service member. So we moved to Italy when I was 17 and ended up graduating from high school in Naples, Italy, or Napoli, as most people know it as. And I was into athletics. I played football, ran track and field. And my senior year, I reached a point where I qualified for certain scholarships in the United States to college. And I'm not saying I couldn't have gotten an academic scholarship, but at the time, I think my athletic ability would have gotten me the scholarship before my academics. And so I was offered a full scholarship to North Carolina Agriculture and Technical State University in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I accepted it. I had a few more offers, but this particular college really piqued my interest, and the long history that it had in the United States with the civil rights movement and things like that. I just thought that's where I fit best. So I went, and I remember registering for classes as soon as I got there, and it was mostly the football team and the other athletes for the fall sports that was there at the time. And, still 18, 19-year-old freshman, I was wandering around, and the professor of military science spotted me. And he asked me, he says, "Are you interested in the military?"
Wow.
Now, you would think that the natural answer would be yes, since I came from a military family.
Absolutely.
But I told him no, I wasn't interested. I didn't see a future in the military, and I was there for athletics. And he really got upset at me for saying that. But like a typical 18-year-old, he misinterpreted when I say I was there for athletics. What I meant was athletics was going to pay my way through college. So that was going to be my first priority, along with academics. So he sort of gave me the business and told me I had a bad attitude. And I said, "Yes, sir." And I moved on to register for my other classes. Well, the next day I showed up, he saw me again during the registration, and he came and grabbed me and says, "Just let me explain what this program is about." And it's called ROTC, the Reserve Officers Training Corps, which is where the majority of US Army officers get their training before active duty. And so I listened to him out of a form of respect because I didn't want him to chew me out again as the previous day.
Yes.
So I ended up enrolling in the program just to take one class to see how it was going to be. Well, 4 years later, I got commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army and made it a career. So I can look back, it's a very good lesson for young people.
Indeed.
Is that don't ever pass up on an opportunity or idea to at least check it out. Because, you know, when you're 18 and 19 years old, you think you may know what you want in life, but it's not really the case, in my opinion. I think you have to have a broad opening of your mind to really figure out what the next step is going to be. And people change, even while you're in university. You think you want to concentrate on one thing, and you end up changing because you get exposed to different ideas and different people and different circumstances. And so, like you, I know you're majoring in law and political science, international relations. Who knows? You may be a famous doctor one day. You know, so,
Yeah.
so and so that's how my career got started. I had one track of ideas in my mind as an 18-year-old, and it changed before I graduated from college. And I've had some of the best Army assignments in my career. I spent 30 years on active duty, and I've served with the tactical infantry and artillery and aviation and special operations and all different fields. But I also got an opportunity to serve with the US State Department. And that's what got me to Macedonia as an Army officer. Totally different world than what I was exposed to. But, you know, as we go through this session, I will give you some great examples of what opportunities a young person like yourself can get thrown at you, and whether you accept it or not, it's just a matter of having yourself in a situation where you can get exposure and know that the entire world is intertwined, and not just in your own country or your own city or your own friends and that type of thing, is that there's a whole world out there that we all touch one way or the other.
Absolutely.
And exposure is the key.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, in the Balkan region, we have a saying, never miss an opportunity because there might not be a second one. Exactly. Therefore, yeah, I heard this saying or phrase at the age of 10 for the first time. Therefore, at the age of 10, I couldn't understand its actual meaning because obviously I was inexperienced and I was very young. And yes, you're right, when at the age of 18 or 19, we are not quite sure about the future career that we as young students, we would like to undertake. Therefore, I remember that at the age of 21, I decided to start a second university because I didn't see myself immersing in the legal career as a judge, for instance. Right. I needed something more. I needed to observe more and to learn more and to travel more and then to decide for my future career. So I couldn't agree more. You're absolutely right about what you have said. Therefore, we mentioned Macedonia and your experience in the Balkan region. How did you end up there, basically?
Well, I was on assignment in South Korea at the time. And normally, when you're in an assignment overseas, you normally don't get an opportunity or even considered for a second overseas assignment. Usually you go overseas, you come back to the United States, do one tour of duty or two, and then you may go overseas again. So I got a phone call about 4 months before my South Korean assignment was over with. And my assignments manager in Washington, D.C. Told me, they said, Quill, we have a great assignment for you. And I said, okay, and anytime your assignment managers say they have a great assignment for you, be very skeptical of what they mean, because you know their job is to assign everyone. So when they called you and says, oh, this is very great, then you know you have to listen and say, okay, what is so great about it? Well, he said the Balkans. And I said, wait a minute, I am in Korea and I'm gonna go from South Korea to the Balkans. I said, that doesn't sound too great to me. And of course, I listened, and he says, well, I don't have all the details of the assignment, but I will send you what they call a description of the assignment. And it was very generic. It didn't give much details, but he did give me the name and phone number of of the person that I was replacing, the officer. And so I looked at the time difference, and when the time difference was early morning, I knew he would probably be at work. And I called him and I says, hey, you know, I am told I'm gonna replace you. And he says, oh, shucks, I was trying to stay for another year. Right away, that told me something, that it was a great assignment.
Wow.
Because if he wanted to stay longer and was being forced to move, and he told me that, then, you know, no one wants to stay in a bad assignment. You know, so my reaction was, well, tell me more about it. And he explained as much as he could over on secure telephone. I started doing a little bit more research on what my assignments manager told me and what he told me, and I sort of put it together. And you know, nowadays you can Google anything and get some information. And that's what I did. And I realized it was going to be a great opportunity. Definitely a change of pace from what I was used to doing. Because by training, I'm an Army Communication Electronics Officer. And what I was about to step into is what you call a FAO, a Foreign Area Officer position.
Wow.
Which at the time, I wasn't even had the qualification on paper. I didn't go to the schools or anything to get that assignment, but I never pass on an opportunity, irregardless. And when you get to a certain grade rank in the Army, you're really considered a to-go person, so to speak, is that you have enough experience that you should be able to handle just about any job that they offer you. You know, in general. I mean, I'm not going to go and be a nuclear scientist or anything, but, you know, certainly I've worked with other nationalities before, other military officers from different countries. So, you know, I didn't think it was going to be that big of a challenge. Anyways, it turned out to be one of the best assignments in my entire career. It was part of the, it started out as part of the Partnership for Peace program, meaning that all the former satellite countries from the USSR, once they broke up, that mainly in Eastern Europe. The US went in and started to do partnership exchanges, just to get us used to each other, the language, our different goals and aspirations and those type of things. And that's what the program was really about. Even though I was assigned to the US Embassy, my office and my staff was in the Ministry of Defense headquarters, the Macedonian Ministry of Defense headquarters. So when I went to work every day, my environment was with the Macedonians. My office staff, 3/4 of my office staff was Macedonians. And so, you know, the first month, I was learning the environment, trying to catch some of the language, some of the phrases, along with collaborating with the embassy and the ambassador and his country team.
And in what year that was actually? In which year exactly was that?
This was 2003, 2004.
Okay.
So at that time, North Macedonia still had NATO aspirations,
yes,
to join NATO. But it's a very rigorous process for a non-NATO entity or country to join NATO, because you have to meet a lot of criteria. And so part of my responsibility and my team's responsibility was to do familiarization sessions and opportunities, exchanges between the United States military and the Macedonian military. And so in a very complicated job description, it was, I am here to expose US military doctrine and what we call TTPs, tactic, techniques, procedures, and that type thing in a familiarization environment, not a training environment, familiarization. This is just for exposure. And, you know, in the time I was there, we executed 34 different familiarization opportunities. And those opportunities were, we would bring teams from the United States, military teams, to Macedonia, and we would have weekly, sometimes bi-weekly sessions, something as simple as developing a 5-year budget.
Okay. And
sounds very good.
Indeed. And have you visited eventually the Krivolak military region? Because that's basically the biggest military area of Macedonia. Basically, Krivolak is in the center of the country.
Oh yes, yes. I remember those trips and introduction to the different military units. As a matter of fact, it got me out of the office. With the people on the ground, you know how things can be in the headquarters. It's very bureaucratic and so on. But when you have an opportunity to go 2 or 3 days out to an actual unit and meet those commanders and those soldiers, that was the best part of it, not the classroom or the office portion of this. And I can tell you, the people your age and younger just wanted so much information, you know, about the United States and Europe and so on. I always tell people about my experience there is that besides these official trips that I used to make, I would also go out on weekends and visit different towns and cities, just by myself. You know, I was very venturous and wanted to learn more while I was there. And the ambassador really encouraged it, because part of the US presence, diplomatic presence in the country, is to engage with the population.
Absolutely, yes.
You know, and see what people are thinking and that type of thing. But I can tell you, in more than one occasion, I would go to a town on a Saturday morning, and I would go to a cafe and sit outside and just kind of people watch and take in the culture and so on. And before you knew it, there would be 10 people at my table. Out of curiosity to see, hey, you know,
Absolutely.
who are you and what are you doing here?
We in the Balkan culture, or in the Balkan region, basically we consider the foreigner as our brother or sister. We never consider the foreigner as a foreigner. It is part of the culture. Therefore, many foreigners, I remember myself, there were some French people coming to Macedonia, or some people even from Salvador, Latin America. I was bringing them to visit Macedonia and stay with my family, just to experience how to live with a Macedonian family. Therefore, I understand you very, very well. Yes, people are curious because they don't know anything about the country where they're coming from.
Yeah. But the one thing that surprised me most about the younger people, especially, was they knew more about American pop culture than I did.
Right.
they could tell me what the most recent movies, Hollywood movies were, and who the stars were, and music and everything. Sometimes I would have to fake it as if, yes, oh yeah, you know, I know, and I would be like, wow, you know.
At school, we basically studied everything. At school, we studied everything about not only about the economy of one country, but political life, cultural life, music life. We study everything in the schools because we have the old curriculum. Therefore, we study everything, even the mountains, the regions, the rivers, the small rivers in a country. We were studying it in every country of the world. Therefore, it's totally understandable.
Yes, well, you know, I lived in the Vodno region, the neighborhood in Skopje, and I was surrounded by all Macedonians. It was myself and another German family that lived in that area, and my neighbors, they just gravitated to me. You know, I remember the first morning I woke up after I arrived, and I'm in a strange country or a different country, and I heard some kids talking. And of course, I rolled up that window shutter. You know, I didn't roll it up all the way, but I rolled it up just enough so I could see who was talking. And it was a lot of kids, small kids at my gate. And I said, good morning. And they didn't know where the talking or the sound of my voice was coming from. So they looked around, and, you know, I'm looking at them this whole time.
To help out because they might think that you maybe don't know the language, so you might need something like to go to the market or visit a store or visit a museum. Therefore, they will all the time check on you, and they will think that they need to help you. Maybe most probably that's why they were doing that.
Well, I found out later why they were there. My landlord had these little Smurf figures in the garden under a tree. And I guess they were very curious about the little figurines, you know, and they were talking and looking. I think they also knew there was someone new in the house.
Absolutely.
Because it's the house that my predecessor lived in as well. And he moved out a couple weeks before I got there, and they refurnished it and so on. But I came out of the house, my front door, and they ran away. But a couple minutes later, I could see 2 or 3 mothers coming with them because they were pointing. And I said, oh, wow, did I do something wrong? And no, the mothers say welcome. They greeted me. They knew my predecessor.
Yes.
And in the next hour or so, I had these fruit and bread baskets delivered to me from the neighbors.
Yes. Yeah, it is very common, very, very common. I agree with you. It's very common. And how many years exactly you stayed in Macedonia?
Well, I stayed 12 months.
12 months, yeah.
Right. I would have stayed longer because it was a 3-year assignment, but I got selected to attend the U.S. Army War College.
Okay.
And that could not be deferred. They wanted to fill all the seats. So I said, could I stay 1 more year before leaving? They says, no, you go to school. So, but it was 1 year of very fulfilling duty where everything that you did, you could see the results further down the road. But what was best was last year when North Macedonia was accepted into NATO, and some of the same people I worked with are in that same office to today.
Really?
And so, I reached out to them and congratulated them, and even Ambassador Lawrence Butler, which was the ambassador at the time, we sort of did a virtual handshake.
Yes. Can you hear me? Hello? Hello, Mr. Quill? There is a Wi-Fi interruption. Hello. Hello again. Okay.
Right. Hey, it's technology,
Yes.
we're at the mercy of technology.
No problem. Yes. You were saying that basically the same people were now in the same office that you were.
Oh, yes.
Oh.
Yeah, they're a little older, a few more wrinkles and gray hair, but
they still work.
It's the same, and it's just very fulfilling when you see the journey from the infancy of the program to where it is now. And that's not just with this program. It can be with any program. We talk about opportunities for young people that wants to make a difference globally or in their own country. And what I would say is that, if you have an opportunity to be part of an exchange program between different countries and culture, it's the best education that you can give yourself.
Absolutely.
The academic part is important, but to actually spend time in a different environment and learning how other people think, you would be just surprised at how it can replace or supplement a formal education.
Absolutely. And when we mentioned, when you mentioned about the programs, I have heard before of the US state partnership program and military to military programs, which are, I suppose, called meal to meal. And
Yeah.
basically, what kind of programs are that? If you can elaborate briefly about the content of that programs or the activities of such programs.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mentioned earlier that in the United States, for instance, and many Western militaries, you have a budget, you know, and the civilian sector of that country approves that budget. But your budget has to be based on, you know, future plans. So if I came up to you and I said, Hristina, could you give me $100? And you asked me, and you says, Quill, what do you need that $100 for? And I said, well, you know, I'm going to have a good weekend. I don't know exactly what I'm going to use it for. You may say, no, maybe I'll give you 20. You can go to a movie and things like that. But I'm not going to give you $100 for the weekend. Well, a budget development is pretty much the same thing. You have to have goals that you set and timelines for developing a budget. Now, under the former socialist or communist way of doing budgetary things like that, you pretty much accepted what you were given. You know, I'm sure there was some basis for how much you got, but we have a very systematic development of our budget, and we learned that very early in our careers, is that you have to look at your national defense, for instance. Who are you defending against? Okay, what are your troop levels, the size of your military, what equipment, you know, what training, all those things. And then you can develop a budget because it's based on your mission and your responsibilities for your defense, your internal defense. And so I'm not saying that there was a very bad method of doing it, but again, it's an exchange of ideas. So we presented our method of developing a budget. So that was one familiarization program between the United States and the Ministry of Defense headquarters. But it could be something as simple as education. How do you develop your officers and your non-commissioned officers? Is there an education program? You know, you go to the military academy, but at certain stages in your career, you have to get more training in order to have more responsibilities, not just in leadership, but in planning and execution. And so we would have exchanges where we would bring some of their senior mid-level officers to the United States. And we would bring them to our service academies and our non-commissioned officer academy and let them see how we do our development of our personnel. One thing that it wasn't planned, but my operations non-commissioned officer, which was an Air Force non-commissioned officer, he was going to be promoted to the highest grade for a non-commissioned officer in the United States Air Force. Now, in the United States, that's a big deal. To make it to the zenith of the rank for your career. So we do very formal promotion ceremonies in the United States. You know, when I was being promoted to colonel, it was a ceremony.
Absolutely.
In so in the officers' corps in Macedonia, there's usually a ceremony, but for the non-commissioned officer, it wasn't considered a real big deal. So we decided to invite our counterparts, Macedonian counterparts, to our ceremony. Well, the invitation list got bigger and bigger and bigger. And by the time it was done, the ambassador was invited, the chief of defense in the Macedonian military, their senior non-commissioned officer, the minister of defense, and we would be asked, why do you make such a big deal out of promoting a non-commissioned officer? And we says, well, they're the backbone of our military. We give them a lot of responsibilities, and we want to show our appreciation for their success. So we make it a big ceremony. Well, before you knew it, as we had to change the venue for the ceremony because it got so large.
Absolutely.
And even the television station in Skopje, the reporter showed up. Now, we never thought that was the intent, but it got to be such a big deal. Well, we made that one of the familiarization program that year, because what turned out to be just a promotion ceremony turned out to be
a national event.
A national event that this is how we do this in the United States.
Absolutely, yes. That always happens, yes.
Yeah, and so you never know what a familiarization item is going to be. You know, you mentioned mill to mill, but we also did mill to civilian. And one of the things that Macedonian is very famous for that may not get all the publicity is your wine production.
Yes, so true.
In regions like Nagotino.
Yeah, Nagotino.
You know?
Yes.
And so we realized that our partnership state for Macedonia is the state of Vermont from the United States. And so on one of the familiarization trips with the Macedonian and the Vermont delegation, we brought business people from Vermont, and we wanted to expose them to Macedonian wine. Well, if you go to Burlington, Vermont today, you will see Macedonian wine being sold in Burlington, Vermont.
Yes, that's the region of the, basically we call it Tikveshia or Tikveshki region, or the Tikvesh region, basically what is famous for the massive grape yards and basically the production of wine, such as Stoby, for instance, very famous, etc., etc. So you're absolutely right. I was wondering, before we wrap up the session, how can we relate all your military activities to the mission and purpose of One Health? For instance, what is One Health for you? How do you perceive it? And how, in military terms, can we perceive One Health, basically? I'm curious to know what you think about it.
Well, you know, I was introduced to One Health by someone that you're familiar with as well, Dr. William Bogerkoff.
Yes.
And he's a retired U.S. Army physician, a colonel, and we met on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
Another very important
network.
networking opportunity. And we started talking, and he had some experience in the Balkans as well, and other places in terms of mill-to-mill exchange, mill-to-civilian exchange. And in the process, he introduced me to Dr. Deborah Thompson,
yes,
which is the galvanizer of One Health.
Absolutely.
And basically, it's doing exactly what we're doing now, but more in terms of a medical environment, where humans, the environment, and animals all interact into something as what we're experiencing now with COVID-19, is that you cannot separate all three of those entities without affecting something else. You know, we always think about bats, you know, and the importance of bats is part of the ecosystem. And I always knew a little bit about that, but if we got rid of every bat on the earth right now, we would all begin to perish, because bats add something to the ecosystem.
Absolutely.
But,
and the food chain system as well, to some extent.
Yeah, right, yes. We got introduced, and myself and both doctors had something in common. We just started talking and started looking at different applications in our own little area that could come together to share information and do things like we're doing right now between you and I.
Yeah.
There's so much collaboration that's done. Sometimes we don't even realize it, that we're doing it.
And One Health is one also of the notions that I think is of a paramount importance, because here in this region we speak always about global health, public health. We speak about the health of the environment, but basically when we mention under the words of, you know, like, or we employ the words like the preservation of the environment is very important. But you know, like when we try to narrow down this notion and basically use simple terms such as One Health, but that has fantastic importance in this world that we're living now, definitely it concludes with the last point that you mentioned, that basically we cannot eliminate bats because we will damage the ecosystem. And
Right.
we are dependent, like nature is not dependent on us, we are dependent on nature. Definitely, you're absolutely right about that. Yes.
Yes.
Well, Mr. Ferguson, thank you very much for accepting this interview to be basically to be interviewed and to chat with me regarding the U.S. military strategies abroad and all the programs that they are conducting. I truly hope that the best lesson that I could learn from this interview is that missing an opportunity, it is something that no one should do it. Like you should always basically catch and the opportunity and just make out of it something fantastic. So this is the point of this also Let's Talk Show webinar, is basically to promote the idea that what we cannot do, or it is something that we can do, or if someone tells us that we cannot do it, of course we can do it if we work hard. The golden rule of this life is hard work and perseveration, nothing else.
Yes, and never be afraid to come out of your comfort zone.
Absolutely. Travel, visit new places, learn new languages, and that's how we're going to make this world a better place for living, not just for us, but for everyone else.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for being part of this interview, and I wish you all of the best in your career as well now, and take care of yourself, and greetings from Istanbul to the United States.
Okay, thank you very much. Vice versa.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.